Okay, hey everybody, we're back after a break. Um, I was just giving a thought experiment that what if there was no internet, but there was Zoom, but all the Zoom was through the cable television network. So everyone's got a television in their living room and they all go there to Zoom. And we're having this meeting literally over the television network. And then suddenly in 2020, the idea of the internet is born. And they said, like, great, let's create an internet. Great, great, great. So we create the internet, but there's no web pages, no Google, no Facebook, no web services of any kind, just a blank internet. And then the first thing we do is we port Zoom over to the internet. Okay, everybody, you can still have the same Zoom meetings you always enjoyed, but we're now moving the Zoom party over to the internet instead of the cable television network. Now imagine, so therefore Zoom is the only thing on the internet, and these Zoom meetings are the only thing on the internet. Let's call this an Internet of Conversations. Let's just give it a name, an Internet of Conversations. Why? Because this is a conversation, and there's millions of conversations happening here, there, and everywhere on these Zoom meetings, recorded, broadcast, etc. So it's an Internet of Conversations. And now we get to the objective of the thought experiment. Well, what's the objective? The objective is, within this Internet of Conversations, what do we need to add in terms of new web services in order to enable this Internet of Conversations to go super intelligent? What's our vision for super intelligence? It's, in a way, it's kind of simple, actually. So let's say there's millions of Zoom video conferences happening, but none of them know about each other, right? So we all keep coming back to the block party and other meetings that we know about, but the millions of meetings that we don't know about, we simply don't know about, right? So one of the things to build in this new Internet of Conversations is some sort of directory of conversations, a public directory, so that people can find those conversations that they're interested in. And so this conversation has a title. It's called, Collective Intelligence Block Party. And it would have the title, maybe a description, maybe some hashtags, et cetera, et cetera. And then associated with each conversation could be its live stream. So there you are in the directory, you're scanning down, you see something that looks interesting, you hover over, and now you see its live stream. So you get a kind of a sample.
Just like the way Google indexes the search.
Basically.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That kind of, so you could search for permaculture and then suddenly see all the meetings that are currently happening on permaculture. You could also imagine a vast topic map, a very logical topic map, right? And maybe see different conversations and where they live on the topic map, for instance. As these conversations are happening, they can be transcribed in real time. So you have text transcripts being generated in real time. We certainly have the technology for that. And then these transcripts are also indexed in real time, put into the Google Index, for example, the database, right? From which results are generated when you do a Google search. That's hitting a database. They basically have the whole web up on their own database. Not the whole web, but links to all the search results. Anyway, so
basically identified links, right?
Yes, but when I talk about indexing, it could be so. The way Google builds their database is they comb through all the web pages on the internet, and they index them.
Correct.
So that when you do a search, then delivers results from the index. So the index is it's probably the biggest database on earth, many times over, the Google index. I don't know that for a fact, I'm just guessing. But anyway, so as these transcripts are generated, they get indexed in real time, continuously, by the equivalent of Google, right? So that you can then do all kinds of sort of what I'll just call advanced search scenarios, where you're searching for, you know, conversations with any kind of attributes. I want conversations where there's minimum 10 people participating, and included in those 10, there's some engineering talent, there's some design talent, there's this, there's that. You know, you can just kind of specify in some way, shape, or form your parameters for the ideal conversation that you want to find, and it'll find you the closest thing, or it'll find you all the conversations that meet those criteria. All right. Now, because our view,
I will what you have said. I will. I go into a private Zoom call where, as a social worker, where a group of let's say like super intelligent, super enthusiastic DIY community youth kind of. So I can propose this idea.
Sorry, what's the idea?
How a Zoom, just the way this conversation. Come back. Good girl. Come on, sit. Yoda. Okay, sorry.
No problem.
How this Zoom conversation can be broadcasted on the television set, not if internet is not there, right? And then how we, but internet is there, so if this facility can be, I think, how do I tame down to the old technology, it will be something like that.
Oh yeah, for what I was talking about, the thought experiment where there is no internet. Yeah.
Correct. So I can talk about just put a thought across over there. They are eager to build things. Yeah, because in India people don't have internet, but 99% have until they are really tribal. So 99% have TV cables. They have it. So it would be interesting.
But the reason I do the thought experiment.
See what I'll pass it on to you what they say.
Cool. I mean, the reason I do the thought experiment is because we have the old internet, which is really based on text and images and all the stuff we know. And these conversations that are happening on Zoom are of a very different nature than, static text on a web page, right? Because they're happening.
Yeah, I agree.
They're happening in real time, and there's just so much richness to them because each of us. Here's what we're not. So you look at the screen right now, right? And I see 6 different squares for the 6 of us who are in this meeting. Do you see the same thing, Kushbu?
I see 4 screens.
Oh,
because I'm
you see 4 because you don't see the ones. You only see the ones that are like active. basically, where there isn't like a static image or anyway. I get what. Okay, so 4 screens. So think of this as a web page. Why not? Right? It's a web page, but now there's 4 people talking on the web page. It's like this Jamin that you see here, right, is a representation of an actual human being who is sharing his thoughts in real time. I mean, it's so different from a standard web page that you need to search for. So the question is, how, with this new thing called the video conference, how do we make it? What tools do we need to create? What tools, like a map, a directory, transcripts, search on those transcripts, etc. What tools and web services do we need to add to this new internet, this internet of conversations, right? So that people can very quickly navigate through, browse, and ultimately join those conversations that they really want to join, right?
Don't you think there is certain kind of danger to it?
Oh my goodness, lots of dangers. But before getting into those, let's first talk a little bit more about the core scenario, right? And the positives. It's not that I'm not interested in the dangers, but let's just first develop what it is a little better, and then we can identify dangers or anything else. But the it.
Okay.
Well, because the it is, let's say there's just like, I don't know, 1 million Zoom video conferences happening right now in parallel, in real time, that are open for new people to join, right? So the question is, well, shoot, if there's 1 million conversations happening, there must be some that I would just love, right? And that map my passions and my interests and this and that. And so I'm just imagining.
You will remove inequality of opportunity in a very large scale. Like there is, yeah,
exactly. And then, so that's from the individual perspective. Now I have all these opportunities out there of conversations that I can participate in and people who I can meet and all that. That's from the perspective of the individual. Now consider the perspective of the conversation. So there's a certain conversation that's happening that has a certain objective, right? Let's say we want to find the most efficient way to do permaculture so that people can grow their own food, in apartments in New York City, right? And so there's a conversation that's happening focused on that. And because now everyone in the world has the ability to find and plug into the conversation they want to be in, this conversation can then be an attractor for permaculture experts and innovators and practitioners and all that, who can now find this conversation and plug in and therefore enrich it. So from the perspective of the conversation, this becomes a mechanism to attract really great talent to help that conversation meet its objectives, right? So if the conversation is about, how do we figure out this puzzle XYZ? And let's say it's just, if it's just the 4 of us in it, and we're trying, but we can't solve the puzzle. But because of this advanced search capability, someone who loves to solve super complex puzzles finds out about our conversation, hovers over, listens in for half a minute, says, yep, I can help here. Boom, jumps in and says, here's the solution, right?
Yeah,
So am I getting you right? So what you're suggesting, like, you're on about actually building like an auto search topics or something like that, like, or topics of conversations. So if somebody comes on the CSI block party, we say, they're coming on that specifically because the CSI block party is specifically for this particular, you know, whole scenario, the scenario of scenarios. But you come into that and you're completely bewildered, lost, because there were, as you said, we're already up to nearly 300 hours of conversation already. There's a lot of indexing to do. So I assume it's like an algorithm, speak or type in keywords and it'll just bring you to the selection of the right conversations, as you said yourself, what's going on that live or recorded.
Yeah, exactly. And let's say you were interested in live conversations that are happening right now. What's going to help you find those conversations is what they've said prior to now. Obviously, you don't know what they're going to say in the future, but whatever they said prior to now in the recent past, even 10 seconds ago, is now transcribed and indexed. And so you type in your search parameters, that'll help you find conversations that are candidates for what you're looking for, right? You know, analogous to search results in Google. You type in whatever you want in Google, hit search, and it says, well, we don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but here are the 10 pages that are closest to that. Likewise, here are the 10 conversations that are closest to what you're looking for. And then... Yeah,
and if it comes to the case like that, there are no live conversations going on at the time. Obviously, when this is only getting going and everything else, there aren't going to be constant live conversations going on. So when people get into this, they're going to be looking at the recordings more than anything until the block party's on or the solution club's on, or we get another day going, whatever. So for the general part of it, people will come on and it's recordings they're going to be going through. So would it be better to attach at the end of each, we say you're putting up recordings in different sections, block party, such and such a day, blah, 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 conversation topic, timing. But, you know, they go, all right, yeah, that's very interesting, blah, blah, blah. And as you said, I have something to contribute to that. So they need to get that out to us then. Like, so on the end of each recording should be like a contact to, you know, so that they can make initial contact straight away in regards to that conversation, that there's somebody left their contact waiting for someone to come back to them with an answer to this question, kind of a thing. So if a conversation finishes up without an answer, then the question is posed at the end of the conversation on the recording, in the hopes that someone finds the answer, has the answer, and then makes the contact. So in other words, unresolved conversations can still leave questions on the recordings. Like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even those conversations, when they end, they can link to a Reddit thread, which keeps the conversation going, but now asynchronously, right? So anyway, I think humanity has a golden opportunity to first envision and then build out the core infrastructure for this internet of conversations, right? Because, you know, different from an internet where we're searching for and browsing through static data that's not alive right now. It could have been recorded 5 hours ago or 5 years ago, but it's past data, whether it's text or a YouTube video, a blog post, whatever. But the internet of conversations is about data and people that are alive right now, happening right now in real time. And so in this internet of conversations, the game is always finding that right conversation where I can either make the biggest possible contribution or learn what I'm trying to learn. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe certain kind of knowledge, art, nature, information is evolved out of certain kind of, like, no, two people, specific two people coming together, or specific three people coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder how that can be taken up, because that will be needed, right? Like, see, if you, for an example, like a lung expert and a heart expert is also needed, and a brain expert is also needed, and for the one topic, something like that, for the one human being, one earth. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. See, my mental model is, for anything that we need to solve, any problem we need to solve on Earth, we can break it down into smaller problems. For any of those smaller problems, to solve that smaller problem, there's a certain combination of people that are needed, right? And
You sorry, but what you are talking about is what I see is as logos. Like, do you know the concept of logos and arrows?
no goals,
Logos and arrows.
logos and arrows. When you say like logos and arrows, and like philosophy.
Correct. So I'm not trying to judge, but I'm deeply listening to you. So when you say it, when you are talking about what is it, it comes to my heart that um I think you're giving that structures, very logos of that, whatever idea you are brewing, it is coming out very clearly. And I think my questions are again driving towards that what about that, what about that, what about that, the flow of it, not the structure of it, kind of.
The flow of it, the flow. So give me an example of something from the flow of it.
Yes, no, I don't know. That is why I'm asking, because yeah.
Well, I'll just keep sharing about the idea. And so, let's say that we're having this conversation, we're trying to solve a specific problem, and we think that we're missing a couple of experts, like maybe a heart surgeon and a lung surgeon or something like that, are missing. And so we could put out a call, broadcast it, right, to the community of people who are searching for conversations to join, and say, hey, we need a lung expert here in this conversation. Here's what we're trying to solve. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. And here's any other information we want to put about that. So if there is a lung expert out there searching for conversations that need lung experts, right, presumably ours might pop up, and then they could hover over and they say, yeah, this doesn't look like a conversation where I could really add value. So they go on to the next. Oh, this one, yes, right? And then they jump in. So the assumption is that, or my mental model is that there are a whole bunch of problems that are holding us back as a world. Problems that we need to solve. Like earlier, we were talking about how to feed everyone, right? And we also need to cool the planet. And there's so many objectives that we have, like cooling the planet, and we've talked about this extensively on previous meetings. Oh, okay, I see something, Sarah. You're trying to, well, let's see, could you, just sell this patent to Google because they already have the infrastructure? Well, with Google, we wouldn't necessarily even have to, sell them anything, but they're already indexing everything that's published on the web anyway. So we could just have a systematic way of publishing the transcripts to the web and maybe working with Google so they index it in real time. But yeah, working with Google is definitely a possibility for this. So, but the bigger picture is that there's a whole bunch of problems we need to solve. So I was just talking about SRM, solar radiation management. We need to design the right system, and that's an engineering problem. Then we need to sell it to the governments of the world. That's a political problem. We need to communicate it to the people of the world. That's a public relations and media and social media set of problems, right? So there's all these problems that we need to solve in order to accomplish the objective of cooling the planet through SRM, right? And so let's say there's 1,000 conversations happening, working on the 1,000 different parts of this. We want to, for each of those conversations, working on a one specific part, we want to be able, for that conversation, the people involved in that conversation, to broadcast to the world, hey, we're missing these particular people, right? The people who we have are great, but we're missing these 3 or 5 people, which instead of being specific individuals, it's more like these are talents that we're looking for, right? These are areas of expertise that we'd like to have in this conversation to help us solve this particular problem. You see what I'm saying? Kushbu, you see what I'm saying? Are you frozen, Kushbu? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. I get it. I think you guys should write it. Work on it. Like inform Google, do something about it. They're talking and do not act.
Hey, Kushbu, you're breaking up real bad. I can't hear what you're saying. Maybe if you turned
internet.
off. Yeah. Or maybe if you turned off the camera, I don't know.
Okay. So, yeah, I wonder, like, do you plan to do something about it, or it's just a thought?
Oh, no, we're definitely doing something about it. That's actually a big part of why we're here in the Block Party. The original purpose of the Collective Intelligence Block Party was to bring together different people who are working on different parts of collective intelligence, so that together we can, learn about what each other is working on and collaborate. So, to ultimately build out all of the infrastructure, the platform, the tools, everything to facilitate all these scenarios that we're talking about. And it's, this is a huge part of what I do, is work on these collective intelligence scenarios and figure out how can we actually, make this a reality. So this Block Party is you know, part of what we thought was necessary, important, and missing in terms of the infrastructure of collective intelligence in the world. We thought, you know what? The world needs a place where people who are interested in collective intelligence can come anytime they want, any Friday they want, and participate in these conversations and meet other people in the community of collective intelligence. Okay, it looks like Kushbu dropped off. Maybe it was an internet thing. Hopefully she'll be back.
Was she having problems with her sound, Jimmy?
Yeah, it was getting a little choppy. She kind of froze up. I was having trouble hearing what she was saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, hopefully she'll be back. But you see what I mean? Where it's like these video conferences are such a different thing that we almost need like a new internet to handle them. With new Googles, new Facebooks, new Twitters. Sarah says, I'm out. We went to bear witness at 2 live markets tonight. Emotional. Wow. Wow. Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for all you're doing, sister. Sounds like you need some sleep, huh? All righty. Well, thanks so much. Both Facebook Lives are on my Facebook page. Awesome. Good stuff. Oh, thank you, Sarah. You are so welcome. The big flash was somebody needs to do this. No one's doing it. Let's do it. And so we just did it. It's a big commitment every Friday, Saturday. But, we get the whole community. James and Emery and you, Sarah, are total pillars to this community that we're forming, to the collective intelligence. So, anyway, yeah, it's like we need to create this new internet of conversations so that people can find these conversations. Those moments in life where it seemed like it was serendipitous, or maybe it was an accident, or maybe it was fate or whatever, but you landed in a conversation that just changed your life, right? Conversations can be life-changing, but rather than us just wandering through life and, landing in this conversation or that, we need a freaking Google. We need a search engine so that we can find those conversations where we can both fulfill ourselves or express our potential, but also so that those conversations can get complete, right? And bring in the people that they need. So it's kind of like this massive puzzle exercise. Every conversation is like a puzzle. It's seeking to find the right pieces to get into the right combination so that that conversation can resolve whatever it is that it's trying to resolve. Design whatever it's trying to design. Analyze whatever it's trying to analyze, right? Answer whatever question is posed that needs to be answered. right?
Way to tease the guy, Jamin. Way to tease the guy.
I'm giving you an opportunity to live vicariously through me. But if it bothers you, tell me.
No, not at all. It's just, you know, the way it is. Like when you have something you don't really want it, or you're not too pushed about it, but when it's not there, you just seem to fixate on the fucking thing. Like, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Not fixate on it, but you know, it's when you do get the thought in your head, and then you realize it's not there. It starts to annoy you then, like, you know what I mean? But no, it doesn't bother me in the least, not at all.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, so we need to create this internet of conversations. I mean, because here's the thing, let's face it, the company Zoom, when they did video conferencing, they were focused on creating this really nice experience with good buffering and good, you know, video resolution and good sound resolution, all this good stuff. But I don't think they were thinking in terms of a social network, a network of conversations and making conversations discoverable and all that. So this is something we need to add on later, right? I'm not criticizing Zoom in the slightest. Great stuff. But I'm just saying they've, you know, out of their great service are popping all these wonderful conversations that, in a way, we're kind of pissing in the wind because people can't find conversations. We're all frustrated. Each of us, it's like, each of us has like our number one priority. I just want to focus on this, right? But we can't make much progress because we can't find the other human beings on the planet who share the same number one priority. That's the problem. And we can solve that problem by coming up with the Internet of Conversations, right? Back in 1975, they dreamed up an Internet of Text Pages, right? And they went to work on that. And out of that, Google and this and that, and all kinds of great tools emerged to help people find text pages. Now we need a whole different set of tools to help people find conversations. Now the bridge between all the tools that helped people find web pages of text and this new Internet of Conversations is the transcript, because a transcript is a conversation turned into text, right? So we're not necessarily that far from what we need, right? In fact, we could even simply use Google search. Google indexes everything anyway. And so maybe a big part of the answer, I think, is just transcribing conversations and getting those transcripts up on the web so they can be indexed and made searchable. But rather than always sort of tinkering with little things like that, What I'm suggesting is, what if we rethink the whole thing? Start from a blank slate, right? And that wanting to start from a blank slate and rethink it all is what brought me to the thought experiment of what if there was no internet and there was just Zoom video conferences happening through cable television, and then we created an internet blank slate and ported all the Zoom video conferences there. And if we could have whatever kind of web services we wanted, all we had to do is articulate them. That's the exercise, is to then articulate what are the web services we want that would turn this Zoomosphere into collective superintelligence. Because you see what I mean? If there's millions of conversations happening, if only James could find that conversation that he wants to plug into right now. You know, let's say you have an inspiration, poof, out of the blue. You thought of a way that we can green the deserts, right? But let's say you're not an expert in desert ecology, you're not an expert in a lot of things, but you have this idea. There's a conversation somewhere that if you just plugged into it, you could articulate your idea, and there are people in that conversation who have the expertise who could say, great idea, James. Here's the one little flaw. So one person identifies the flaw, and then another person in the conversation solves the flaw. Right? But for all that to happen, you had to have the right combination of people. Right? And I think there's an art and a science to creating the right combinations of people. Nolan, you're still awake.
Yeah, not for long. I just came to say goodbye.
All right. Well, great to see you. Thanks for holding the fort.
Of course. I'm glad you got some time off.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy your sleep, Nolan. Talk to you later, man.
Sweet dreams.
All right, thanks.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, Nolan.
See you guys.
Take care. Have a good one. Yeah, at the last block party, Nolan just hung in there until like 7 a.m. and then he was really shot. And, you know, speaking of the art and the science of this, you know, I'm just going to say crafting these conversations, these perfect conversations, because that's at the heart of, that's the essence of collective superintelligence, is a network of the right conversations, where each conversation has the right combination of people, the right focus, the right context, the right goal, and they're able to achieve that goal or solve whatever it is they were trying to solve. And anyway, more on that in a minute. I'm going to take a little pause. I'll just pause recording and then I'll be back in like 5 minutes or so. I'll be right back, or not right back, but back in 5. Pausing recording. All right, after a little pause, you know, we're back to this internet of conversations, right? And there are ways of there's so much stuff here. I'm just going to start rattling off some of the things in this realm of stuff related to this internet of conversations. So you have transcripts, you have who said what, you have the videos, the video recordings with the audio, and you can marry those with the transcripts, of course. Otter AI, which Nolan and I both use, does that. And you have people in a given conversation specifying who they think they need to join the conversation. They can put out invitations, broad invitations like that, or specific targeted invitations. You have topic maps and associations of conversations to topic maps and to, you know, well-defined topics within a taxonomy. You can define new topics. You can specify whether a conversation is open to receive new people, or if it's like, no, we don't want any new people right now. Let's just go with who we have. By the way, I've never had that experience on the block party where it's like, wow, this is going great. I hope nobody else joins. Right? I'm always happy to see new people join. Right? And we've only had a few people who've been problematic, who we've, you know, had to distance ourselves from, or they distance themselves from us, or whatever. But in general, I'm happy when more people join. Right? You kind of feel the collective intelligence getting bigger. Right? That's good. I just love your kitty. It's a female, right? Or male?
Yeah, this is Jessie. She's suckling off me. You know, this is what she does. She thinks I'm her mother, and every now and again she just gets up and starts kneading on me and suckling off my cardigan or jumper or whatever the case is. At the moment, she's having it's kind of like a massage for me, and she gets a bit of satisfaction over it as well.
No, I love it. I love it. We've had cats over the years, and I absolutely love cats, and I love the kneading and all that. And I would just spend hours with our cat. So I love it. And how old is Jessie?
Jessie, you know, is 7 years. I think they are 7 years now, and her brother is the same. They were both born in the same litter. Walt, he's a bit shy. He's out on top of the sink learning how to tap dance. But it's strange because when we got them, they came out of the same litter, and he was twice the size of her. She was a dot. She was like the runt of the litter.
Yeah.
And she never really got much bigger. She's fully grown now, obviously, like, but she's like, compared to Walt, she looks like a kitten. And he looks like a lynx or something. He's a Scottish wildcat, definitely. Like, he's got all the markings. She's completely different to him. She's a marmalade mixture or whatever. But yeah, they're complete different personalities as well. Like, she's very persistent, and Walt is so patient and loving. Like. And he just every time I pass him or if I go, I think he's perched on the sink because he knows I like my tea. So the sink is one of the most frequent places I've been going to fill the kettle. So he's just there to give me a hug, and he loves when I just put my arm around him when I'm filling the kettle, and he just burrows his head in under my shoulder and I tap him on the head. He just loves being cuddled.
Wow.
He's a pure softie.
Beautiful. Wow. But anyway, this internet of conversations. It just feels like there's so much potential. To just imagine and dream our way into this internet of conversations and these different scenarios. Like, I just kind of imagine, imagine a universe of conversations like your artwork right behind you, James, right? Where each, and I just love the universe as something that we can reference. Isn't it just fascinating? There's galaxies, and there's like, whatever, hundreds of billions of galaxies, or I don't know how many. And then within each of those, there's hundreds of billions of stars. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It goes on and on. Well, like that, there can be clusters of conversations. And then you zoom in, and there's a whole, whoa, and then you just keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in.
I like that. A nebula of new conversations being born.
Yeah, and then check it out. And then let's say a conversation itself is like a planet, right? Then you land on the planet. Now you're in the conversation. But even that conversation, if you look at its past trajectory, it's gone through all kinds of, there's just this rich trajectory that it's gone through. But how like the block party is like a place, right? With a culture and a community and some goals and some philosophies, and we're pretty open. We're very, very, very open, actually, and that's part of the culture. But it's like a little planet unto itself, right? You land here, and okay, oh yeah, all right, I'm in the block party, right? And you go to some other meeting, on a Wednesday, and it's like a whole other planet, a whole different culture. So I just imagine, being like in a spaceship and just being able to teleport instantaneously from any one planet, any one part of the universe to any other, right? Again, each conversation is its own planet. There are solar systems where there's a bunch of planets that are in very tight formation, right? And then there's whole other stars that are light years away or whatever. Doesn't it just blow your mind how big the universe is? It's just absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, what a I'm sure glad I'm in this universe and not in some tiny, much flatter universe. You know what I mean? With fewer options. And here we are like birds in a cage, just looking out at the greater world outside, but not being able to go there. Anyway, better a bird in a cage than a bird in a box. But, you know, again, this whole universe of conversations, and universe may be the good metaphor because, you know, before we'd look up, before, hundreds of years ago, we just look up and we just saw lights, right? Stars, but without really thinking about it too much. And then we started mapping them out. And then we got telescopes, and then we got this, and then we got that. And then we started creating whole models for like the solar system. Instead of the Earth being at the center, it's the sun at the center. And then I just love how Jesse, meow, 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 meow. Now, does she hear me? Oh yeah, Jesse, meow, 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 meow. Anyway, you're on mute, James.
She's only interested in grooming at the moment, no, or else getting attention from me.
No problem. I just love it. I love the partnership you guys have. It's beautiful. Anyway, so it's like we're gonna start to form models of this universe of conversations, right? And it's just such a dynamic universe, right? It's just such a dynamic universe because new conversations are being born all the time. Other ones are dying. Other ones are getting new people. Others are losing people, right? And if we come at it from a place of non-attachment, like I could be like really attached to the block party. I want it to be this great thing, and it's connected to my ego, and everyone's talking about Jamin as this great guy. Yeah, I could, whatever. I could do some big ego trip on it. But what if we did the opposite? What if we just said, look, our mission is to, each of us find our pathway through the universe of conversations. And in some cases, that may mean creating a whole planet. Poof, just creating it. That's a conversation. And then broadcasting to the rest of the universe. Poof, hey, I'm here and I'm doing this. Anyone interested? Right? And then boop, boop, boop. People could just start to show up and appear. And I love that you've got that artwork behind you, James, because it helps me think about it, right? And I love using the universe as kind of the metaphor because it's basically infinite, right? I haven't heard of anyone discovering like a giant brick wall over here that says, sorry, this is the end, the edge of space. And it's so vast. So, yeah, so you just create a planet. That's a conversation. And then you can imagine like the block party. We turn it on for 24 hours and then we turn it off for 144 hours, right? And then we turn it on for 24, off for 144, on for 24, off. So it's kind of like a planet that turns on, and then it's active for 24 hours, and a bunch of people come, and then they go away at the end, well, they come and go, but at the end of 24 hours, the whole pub closes, right? There's just no more people there. But I mean, in general, it's a problem space with infinite possible combinations, right? I don't know if you've ever done like combinatorial stuff like in math in school or whatever, but like if I have 3 different dice, right? Let's say red, yellow, green. I roll the red die and it rolls a 3. Yellow die rolls a 5. Green die rolls a 1. 3, 5, 1. The number of different combinations that I can get if you consider the sequence 1, 2, 3, red, yellow, green. It's 6 times 6 times 6, which is 36 times 6, which is 180, 216. So there's 216 different possible rolls that I could do. From a combinatorial standpoint, let's say there's, 1 million different conversations happening and 1 billion different people who could be participating in any of those. I mean, the number of different combinations of people in conversations is just, it's just beyond it's astronomical. So in terms of what's possible, we're now in this space that's just unimaginably vast in terms of possibility, being the conversational domain, right? I mean, here we are 24 hours at a stretch in this super long conversation, but we could equally well be zipping around, bouncing around. Now, part of the reason that we don't do that so much is because there's not that much of a culture for it, right? And maybe that's a culture we need to create. Like, just consider speed dating. I've never done speed dating, but, I've heard of it and been intrigued. Do you know what it is? Okay. So, if I went to a bar, and I just went from one woman to the next and I spent 5 minutes talking with each woman, I'd probably get thrown out of the place for harassment. But if I went to speed dating, it's organized. I spend 5 minutes talking with this woman, then 5 here, 5 here, 5 here, and we see if they're, where there's chemistry. I mean, 20 guys, 20 gals, they go that in, and it's just kind of like musical chairs, and they just spend 5 minutes talking with each person. So it's an organized thing. So maybe we need to organize, like speed networking kind of things, right, on Zoom video conference, and help people kind of get over it, right, in terms of connecting with people that they haven't met before, making new connections, jumping into conversations, going from conversation to conversation.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. But like the speed dating, and you need a room full of people first who are willingly participating. And at the moment, we're building our numbers, but not sufficiently enough for having those breakout rooms. And one of the other points I'd say, I know you're saying you get where people are probably hesitant about talking to new people for the first time. We're doing that here anyway. You're already that barrier is broken down on the block room anyway, because we're already talking to people that we didn't know from the outset, but now we've all become very good and close friends. Well, I believe that anyway. And when there's a sufficient number of us with specific subjects that we would like to break out of, I think one of the inhibitions there is the idea of oh, I don't know if I go into a breakout room and just sit there on my own for ages. What if no one comes? Or I think when I just joined yesterday, Miles had been in another room. Unless he was on about the waiting room, no, I'm not sure. But point is, it's a nervous thing as well. We say no, I wanted to start off a break-off room. I don't know. I could pick a vast number of subjects, to be honest with you, because my head is full of that. You know, that's just me. But if I hone in on one thing and said, okay, I'll do something like permaculture or perma gardening or something in your own local garden or your apartment, and show people how to plant food and how to do it efficiently and what have you, I'll get all the irrelevant information I'd need before I was ready to do that presentation as such. It could be a PowerPoint presentation or whatever, just to get the conversation going. But that's what we need to do. Like, we need to help each other figure out ways of setting up our own little room. Say, I'll just say, no, I'm just going to put out there. I'm going to set up a room that where I'm going to show ideas about how to do a little bit of home gardening. So maybe you could grow your own food while while everything's going on like this. Obviously, I'd be hesitant that nobody would show up for it, but at the same time, I think I would need help to organise that. I know how to set up a PowerPoint and everything else. Unfortunately, I'm stuck on my phone, so I need, the laptop for that. But the point is, I'd have no problem doing it. I'm just, technology is holding me back now at the moment, but I have no problem doing it. But I would be hesitant. That would be my main inhibition, would be, what if no one comes and I'm sitting in a room on my own for a while? I think people are thinking that anyway. Like, so we need to get over the inhibitions. We need to get over these fears, and we need to help each other. Say, all right, I have an idea for a breakout room. Can people, give me an hour here, and we'll try and sort it out so that I can get it organised. And then, what, as you're saying there with your universal conversations, it could be a way of indexing the Google of conversations, or as you were saying, the network of conversations. It could be the index could be the galaxy, the nebulas could be where the conversations are being born, and the planets are where they're congregating on these ideas. Then the Solution Club could be, the nebula of stars, where it's just, out of all those conversations on one particular subject, a new star is born. Then the gem, the answer, the conclusion to what that conversation was all about in the first place, like, or even possible further possibilities. Either way, anyway, I get where you're coming from, but we just need to start making more of an effort as the people that are here already. I know we don't have the numbers, but I think if we create a bigger, as you're saying, a bigger scope of subjects for people to come into the block party for, and having literally an index on the block party as well. Maybe get somewhere getting the index up on the waiting room before they come in or something. Either way, you're right. Like, we need to move it. No, we need to push, and everybody need to get over their nervousness and things.
Yeah. I also think we've got a huge opportunity in envisioning what can be, right? Yes, we need to push and right here and immediately in the here and now get more people in and all that. I totally agree with that. But at a whole different sort of time scale and scope is envisioning what can be. Because if we create a compelling vision, that can really help draw people in, right? So I think if we can paint a picture of this universe of conversations and the ability to wormhole teleport from any conversation to any other, right? And the ability to have a map, sort of like a hitchhiker's guide to the galaxy, right? Of this universe of conversations. And, you know, eventually we'll have bots that just are like your R2D2 that just like, broop, broop, oh, you want to go to this galaxy? Here, let me take you there. Or, you know, here, let me tell you, let me suggest planets that you might want to visit, given everything I know about you, right? But I think the envisioning and even the art around it are really going to be powerful, because think about it this way. Whereas, you know, decades ago, you'd have visionary artists painting visions of what the future might be like in 100 years. And you're like, well, that's great. I'll be, you know, long dead by then, but okay, whatever. Versus whatever art we create of this universe of conversations, we're only a couple weekend hackathons away from actually manifesting them, you know, in theory. So it could be really exciting that way, right? You know, what it feels to me is it feels to me like we are early pioneers in rallying humanity to take on this incredibly cool project, like going to the moon and back, right? And we're, you know, it's like we got to the party a little bit early and very few people are here, and we're like starting to beat the drum and say, hey, everybody, come. Let's do this. Let's get to the moon and come back. I don't know how we're going to do it, but let's get together and do it. Right? Kennedy didn't know how the heck they were going to do that. He just said, let's do it. How about it? That was a major milestone in getting us to the moon. If he hadn't made that speech, we wouldn't have gone to the moon. I'm convinced of that. In our case, it's the press conference. Instead of the Kennedy speech, it's the press conference. In both cases, we set something in motion. We create a singularity. We create a moment in time, a moment in history that changes the course of history.
Yeah, definitely. For the press conference, you took the words over my mouth, because the press conference is the ultimate advertising tool for us as well, for the Bloc Party, for the CSI Bloc Party. It's the ultimate advertisement for that, while at the same time letting people know what it is we're up to. But it's also, CSI, the Bloc Party, is also the answer for the people, the negatives that are going to be asking, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to do that? Who do you think you are? How are you going to do that? The answer is, we are doing it already, but we need more to contribute. So we're all going to do it. You included, if you so wish to join. If you don't, stay over on your negative podium.
Yeah, totally. And also it answers the ever-present big objection of, well, that'll never work. The cool thing about the press conference, followed by a tour of the restaurants that are actually producing the food and delivering it, is it's working, asshole. Right? The cameras don't lie. So anyway, yeah, that's exactly where it shifts reality. It goes from idea and dream into actual physical reality. And that changes everyone's reality. And because everyone finds out about it at the same time, because it's the media, it's through the mass media, it's like a shockwave of reality transformation that just goes all around the world. So anyway, this universe of conversations, And if you look at the universe through a telescope, it's one universe and it's relatively constant. Yeah, occasionally some star dies or goes supernova or turns into a black hole or something like that. And every once in a while, a new star is born. But it's a relatively constant picture versus our universe of conversations will just be getting reshuffled. Every hour it'll be a new ball game, right? New conversations were born, certain conversations that were very unknown, very hidden, went viral. And now you've got, 2,000 people participating in it and another 500,000 watching live. Why not? So I think we've got some really good work to do in terms of, painting a picture of this, envisioning it, and sharing that vision first with ourselves and then gradually with others. I'm outside on the back deck and it's raining. It's raining here. Oh, it's kind of nice that it's raining. Ugh. And the temperature is warming up. This universe of conversation. And, Lauren pointed out last week that that people, much more than gravitating towards a specific topic of conversation, they gravitate towards their tribe and they get into conversation with people in their tribe, right? Which is a really interesting sociological phenomenon. And, I have two things to say about that. One is, okay, let's accept that reality and just work with it. And another thing I have to say is let's see about transforming culture so that people are more liberated to jump from tribe to tribe, right? Those are just two bookends which immediately come to mind about that. And in fact, we can even consider that a new form of culture could emerge, which is this kind of planetary, universe of conversations culture. That's, that's both open and efficient and I don't know what. And even within a given culture, there can be different rule sets, right? Hey, let's play according to this rules versus this other rules, right? I mean, they're in Ireland, it's one culture, but you have this board game and this other board game and this other outdoor game and this other indoor game and this other telephone game and this other internet game, you know. So with different rule sets, different modalities of conversation, right? So I think if we, to the extent that we make transparent and manageable the different modalities of conversation, the different rule sets, etc., we can essentially, by the practice of all this, we can essentially create a new culture for this new universe of conversations. Different medium, different culture, right? You know, like in the United States, as a country, when everything was in person, it was one culture, right? And then as things evolved over time and the country grew and the West got populated and then telephones came into existence, the culture changed. You know, there's this telephone culture, right? Which I, you know, became very proficient at, right? There were times in my life where I had to make lots of phone calls to people I didn't know and get a conversation going and all that. And I remember when I first started doing that, I was, when I first started doing that in a big way or a significant way, I was probably like, I was 19 years old. It was summer of 1987. And I would get nervous because I was just practicing how to do it, right, for the first time. And, you know, making calls, basically, it was basically business development, you know, looking for opportunities to sell to certain products to businesses. And, but it wasn't a cut and dried thing. It was this thing I was just creating. And so as such, it was exploratory. But anyway, my point is that conversations by telephone with people I didn't know was uncomfortable for me initially. But then when I got into it, I got good at it. And believe it or not, it even became fun once I became good at it, right? So I think we've got really good potential to evolve as a species into this new culture that we're being called upon to birth, right? Which will help us become super intelligent. We simply need to get super intelligent right now. Or like the name of that movie, Get Smart. We need to get smart. We just need to. It's what we're called upon to do right now. If we want to survive, you know.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I understand the urgency, but that's the problem, is that the majority don't. The press conference seems to be the answer to it, though.
Yeah, isn't that exciting? And this whole Dos Equis situation has it's just created the perfect conditions for that press conference to be a real thing. Can you imagine doing that press conference 6 months ago? People would have looked at you like, what? Why do you want to do that? Right? There's no pandemic. There's no, the economy is working. If people want to eat, they can work, right? Etc. Right? But now everything is so radically transformed. What an exciting moment to be alive. I mean, we may not be alive much longer, but it's certainly exciting while the ride lasts.
An exciting time to just cop on We Are Alive. And then realize, oh, shit. But I mean, you're right, Jamin, even the conversation or even the press conference obviously is not going to be sorted within the next immediate weeks or two, but it's coming down the line quickly. But also, like, I mean, given now that the press conference is going to be held in America, I'm making this is why I'm stating about. But the American situation with the Dos Equis at the moment is that it's now slowly or being trying to be pushed back to normality, regardless of the Dos Equis. It's like it's time to go back to normality now. Like, we can't keep this up. Like, the economy is more important. Like, so that kind of way of mentality is starting to slowly settle in. And by the time the press conference comes around, it could be a situation where a lot of the states are open already again for business. And they're going to say, well, sure, we don't need that now. We don't need food delivered to people's houses now, like, and everything. But that's the thing of it. Like, you see, the sad thing about it is that we'll just say, hold up there now. Don't be too hasty. Because, history and science tells us that, this is not over. And we're just preemptively thinking it is. That's all. And when it comes back with a vengeance. So we're now looking ahead again. Again, as I said last night, this is what it's all about. It's about looking ahead and preemptively preparing for these situations that are going to be constantly arising in our futures, in our near futures now, all the time. People are not aware of them. They need to be aware of them. And even though we might be laughed off the stage here today, you could say, because blah, 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 for whatever reasons people think we're crazy or whatever, we've put the idea out there. We've manifested the actual infrastructure behind the idea, as you said, with the food being delivered anyway and everything else. We've shown that it can be done. And we've shown that there's a necessity, an urgent necessity for it, because it's not just the only problem that needs to be addressed, but it's the main problem or priority at the moment that we're fixating on to be addressed. And though you may think it's gone, it's not. And even if it was, its cousin, mutated brother, or whatever else is going to be back next year, 2 years' time, whatever. We're going to be back in this situation again. Are we just all going to lock ourselves down again and go, oh shit, what do we do now again? No, we preemptively attack. We preemptively attack the situations and scenarios that are going to arise. And that's why we're here. So anyone that wants to laugh us off can laugh us off. But the last laugh will be on them. That's on us, you know what I mean? That's the way it is. So regardless, the press conference is the key, and wording it right and having the answers. So that's why I was saying last night, you have to be ready for the negative questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we should come up with a whole Q&A. But more than that, just tell the story.
She's massaging me again. I think she can feel my blood pressure going up.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Jesse. Meow. 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 That's so cute.
She's engrossed when she does that. She just goes off into, I don't know, it's like she's in, I don't know, euphoria there or something.
Yeah. No, like I said, I spend a lot of time with our family cats, and They're just such amazing creatures like that.
The strange thing is we never had cats ever because my mother was allergic to them. So we, like after my mother passed away there, 2007, her own dog, well, it was Stephanie's dog and more my mother's dog, but Pluto was his name. And yeah, he lived on for another number of years, all right. And sadly, because of medical situations and everything else, and he got very cranky. And when he got cranky, he bit a child then as well. And but medical reasons, we had no other choice but to put him to sleep for his own, put him out of his misery, kind of a thing. Like,
yeah,
it broke my heart to do it. Don't get me wrong, and I still feel guilty to this day for doing it. But after that, I swore I wasn't going to get no more pups because it broke my heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be, So Stephanie came along afterwards in a couple of years and said, "Look, how about if I get a kitten?" And the only reason we never had cats, as I said, was because my mother said she was allergic. So I said, all right, fair enough if you want to get a kitten, but you have to look after it. But unfortunately, they've gravitated to me again, like I don't know why. Like, but so yeah, I've gotten used to them now in the last couple of years that we've had them. Like, and a lot of people come in here and say your cats are strange. They don't act like normal cats. Like, I don't know. So I don't know because I have nothing to compare it to. I'm going to make a quick cup of tea there, Jamin, but I can still hear you while my speaker's on anyway.
Oh, very good, very good. Yeah, take your time. Take your time. I'm going to reset my chair here. Rain is starting to impact. I'm coming in from the rain. Just going to get reset here. Inside. It was raining out there, so I had to, I'm resetting to the inside. All right, I relocated in from outside where it was raining, and I'm gonna hit the bathroom and pour something to drink and get a little food, and I'll be right back. I'm gonna pause recording for a few. All right, we're back after a little pause. And Ron just asked me, what it was your question? Why is it that people come and go?
Why are the particular people that are coming and going, what motivates them to be part of this?
Yeah.
I mean, I've read your mission, and I've looked at your web pages and stuff like that, and I've stuck my nose in here a few times, but that's all I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would start with your own example, if you're willing. Why do you come? What keeps you coming? What's, how would you describe?
I'm working with a group that we call YARCY. It's a YARCY test now at Colony on the Ethereum blockchain, attempting to learn how to put together a peer-to-peer network that operates in a basis that the positive energies in the group collect a group of people, a movement, basically focused on learning how to learn, and taking things in the research lab and moving them from that research lab out into the world, getting them out there where they're real. So much stuff gets built in a research lab or in hacking in one way or the other that never gets beyond that demonstration sort of level. And to take it from that demonstration sort of level into the world to do the kind of good. Probably the thing that we're working on, or that's got us most motivated, or most of the people that are part of this organization are most motivated about, is this fuel cell operation that will be completely contained and do no polluting and provide us energy to move cars, airplanes, ships, and even to just operate as a battery on the big grids. Because in the grid, we have the problem with all of this intermittent energy. And batteries, once you make them and use them, is a very big polluting effort itself. This thing will create no pollution in its operation, from the sense that the fuel that it uses is just recycled. Hydrogen is pumped into it and taken out of it. And it won't be that disruptive, from the sense that the fuel is like gasoline that you could pump through the same infrastructure that you now use to drive automobiles most of the time. So anyhow, that's one project. Probably the things that motivate me personally the most is to learn and learn how to learn. I believe, and it's just an act of faith, that the young people in this world, with all they are learning and the creativity they have, will solve the unsolvable problems that we have in this world today. And I see you working toward trying to do something just like that. And you're taking a very different approach than we're taking. And I'm trying to learn. That's basically it. The future is going to be in the hands of our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And I have got grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I want this world to be a better place from them. Yeah, that's where I am. And I believe technology is a solution, not the problem. I also believe that capitalism and how we use it, if we use it properly, is the solution, not the problem. I understand the disparity right now between the value of capital and the value of human work and creativity. But I think that'll get fixed. And then I could get political, but I'm going to stop there.
Very good. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think vast majority of us who come here are drawn here because we want to save life on Earth.
Good morning.
Miles, how you doing?
Good morning.
Making coffee.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I thought I'd join in on the closing ceremonies, final hour.
Awesome, Miles. Thank you.
So do you guys just keep on talking? I'm making my coffee and listening.
Well, I'm curious
Join
as to,
soon.
have you been here many times, Miles?
Yeah, I've known Jamin. I should see if I can dig around in my notes, but I suspect it's almost 3 years now. Wow, time flies. I haven't really. I've taken a lot of notes, and my wife is after me because all I do is write notes. And I have this. I got a website. Stupid me. I bought a website because I thought, okay, I got to put a, every business needs a website, and I've been paying for this thing, but haven't used it. So I'm getting the gears for not producing anything. So anyway, I'm very close, but a lot of what I've learned and the connections and a lot of stuff coming to me through the Zoom channel. And well, I'm sorry, I mean the Radish channel here.
And what is the business you're in?
Well, I worked in railways. I'm in Canada. We tend to say railways as opposed to railroads.
Yep.
And I was 30 years in railways, and well, 2 companies over that period of time, 25 years with the Canadian Pacific Railway. And now since I was laid off, I was like, all right, what's most important? What's meaning and purpose? What am I going to do in the home stretch? And very interesting, isn't it, that everybody's now talking about meaning and purpose? What are we all doing here? Not just me, but so. And to that end, I started to think, all right, what is going to make a difference for me? Is it just all about getting a job and retiring and riding off into the sunset? Is that why we're here? And I don't think it is. It's not just about being comfortable and ending up in an old folks home hooked up to a ventilator as you just are kept alive by medical technology. There's a lot of people in that situation. I'm not saying that they haven't had very meaningful lives. They probably had, but myself, I just don't think I've done what I need to do, and that's the business I'm in, is figuring that out. So it's not much of an answer for you, but I have a concept that I want to work on, and one of the things that I've encountered in this period of time, since I got laid off and started to think about, well, what do I need to do? It happened to coincide with what's called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report in Canada. And I read the summary report of that Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I realized that the Indigenous people have so much to teach me, and I've been learning. And what the reason I don't get involved in anything is because I'm really focusing on what is called free, prior, and informed consent. So for me to work with, say, not so much this block party doesn't concern me because it's social, but for me to work with Vegan World 2026, I want to take it to the local Indigenous elders and say, okay, this is what I think is important, and would you give me your consent to move it forward on their traditional lands? So my business is a combination of pulling a lot of stuff together. Sorry, I've been.
Are you of Native American descent? Do you have Native American ancestors?
No, I do not.
No.
As I said, I'm in Canada. Right. My heritage on my mother's side is a little bit uncertain, but it's probably English, European anyway. And then on my father's side, it was people who spoke German, but they lived in southern, what's now part of Romania and southern Ukraine, and around the Odessa area. So no, I have no Native American heritage. But the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report in Canada really opened up a lot of people's eyes, or at least some people, to just how it's an ongoing really genocide is what it is. It's not as bad as it was, but there's different definitions of genocide under the United Nations, and one definition, they've basically over time, over the past 150 years, you'd have to say that, Canada has been guilty of genocide in all of its different nuances, I guess you could say, because there's cultural, but then there's also, actually the destruction of the people, the killing of the people. So, and so
rarely.
Sorry,
I'm a amateur genetic genealogist, and I've spent a lot of time looking at just what other people have done as far as research work, but work on ancient DNA as well as using DNA to trace your more recent ancestors. But in ancient DNA, it's fairly clear that when two human populations have run into each other, they usually go through a cycle of trading, making babies, and then practicing some form of genocide.
Interesting.
They do not normally merge together. There are several civilizations that have successfully had them merge together, and one of them, early one, was the Roman Empire. Because when you were captured and the Roman Empire captured you, they immediately moved you into being a slave. But you could go from being a slave to being a soldier or a very valuable worker within the community and move right on up the ranks. Not what we did as slavery here in the United States, which is chattel slavery, and probably the biggest reparations we need to make. But the same thing applies to the United States that applies to Canada from the sense
Yes.
of wiping out the indigenous population of the natives that were here. So there's been lots of violence of man on man.
Well, and
over
you know,
the
it's interesting.
millennias.
You know, one of the things that's happened is that, you know, even the indigenous people will say, I believe a lot of what you just said, that they always they had their cultures, they had their languages. So, for example, I live in Calgary, which if
Yep.
you 150 years ago, if you were going to Calgary, you might just point to your elbow as sign language.
Mhm.
And there was, within this area, there were multiple indigenous languages, and they could understand each other to a large extent, but they also had to rely on sign language. So
Yep.
they recognize that we are all one. They're often saying, "Oh, we're all one." Namayit is a Haida word or Salish word from the coast near where Jamin is, and it means we are one. You know. So anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is they're not adverse to adopting people and incorporating people, at least the ones I've seemed to have encountered, as you were saying. What
that's
we've
what
done,
I ran into. Is I'm an elder in the Mankind Project here it's mostly in the United States, but it's all over the world. We have some training centers or groups up in Canada as well. But the Mankind Project has a group called the Elders, and the Elders are both older men that want to mentor men, and then they are certified elders that play a role on our major training, which is a New Warrior Training Adventure. And I was on that training adventure one weekend, and in that role, and there was a young man making talismans. And I say a young man, he was probably about 65, maybe a little older, I don't know. But he really touted his Cherokee heritage. And at some point, once I'd gotten to know him a little while, I held my arm up to him and I said, you know, you're as much Scotch-Irish as I am. How much actual Native American ancestry do you have? He said, absolutely no blood connection. He said, but you got to understand, I married a Cherokee princess. We have 4 children, and I have raised them on the reservation. And I have worked there all of these years to the point that I am now the chief of this particular reservation. He says, so don't tell me I'm not Cherokee. I am. He says, but I don't have any of that, quote, Cherokee blood as far as the DNA is concerned. So us being one is about human connection and our willingness to serve, which he had done, and won all of the, you know, kudos he needed in order to be in that role.
Yeah, and what the situation here is that for 150 years, and why do I say 150 years all of the time, is because, well, the Indian Act in Canada is about 150 years old. The country is about 150 years old officially. You know, whereas our celebration is July 1st, yours is July 4th. You celebrate 1776, we celebrate 1867. So that's why I say we're 150 years old. But of course, we're really the same age, you know, in a sense. Whether you're in Canada or the US, these dates are what we created, as opposed to saying, well, it was, for example, you could say, well, we should all go back to 1534, perhaps, because that's when Jacques Cartier came over from France and stuck his cross or sword at the head of near the St. Lawrence, and it was long before Canada or the United States. Anyway, so, but getting back to what you're saying, they're not adverse to sharing. They're the ones that in 1613 in New York, when the Dutch were the only white people in New York area, they said to the Dutch, let's have the two-row wampum peace and friendship treaty. So they were from the get-go, they were like, okay, hi, how are you doing? Well, let's share. But we brought over this concept of what Jamin's always talking about, hoarding and, conquering and taking over. And that's what they, of course, find reprehensible, and we should find reprehensible too. It's not that they think that they have to be, held up on a pedestal and forever preserved. They're more than willing to adopt and learn, but they don't. They rightfully say, well, we're not going to be allow you to conquer us. And so we've brought over a patriarchal system where they were mostly a matriarchal system, and it's like, well, we shouldn't be so bullheaded. We need to adjust.
It's hard to figure all that out because all of it at some level is mythology. We actually got here back in the 1000 time frame, and the Indians really did drive us off. Eventually, they showed the Vikings that you're not welcome, and so the Vikings did not come back. And their answer of why they didn't come back was the natives were not cooperative. And then we get all the way down to 1492. But the other side of it, from a sense of matriarchy or patriarchy, there is in biology a model that I think is just really wonderful from that standpoint, in that our closest relatives, among our closest relatives, are chimpanzees and bonobos. And the bonobo is a matriarchal society. And the bonobo looks just like a chimp. Most of the movies you've seen, old movies with chimpanzees in it, they weren't chimps. They were actually bonobos. And that reason is that the bonobo is much friendlier, much more docile, much more willing to cooperate and work together. And the bonobo female is still smaller than the bonobo male, but the matriarchs run the clan or group that lives together. And when a chimpanzee, two tribes run into each other, they really fight. But when a couple of bonobos tribes run into each other, they intermix in delightful ways and then go on off. So we could be more of a matriarchal kind of society. I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, well, I think it's very interesting about the bonobos. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that. And even like the First Nations here, for example, the Niitsitapi of the Blackfoot Confederacy, very much the similar stories to, say, the Lakota people of the Black Hills of South Dakota. I've listened to a lot of YouTube by Russell Means, who's a Lakota man. He recently deceased, but he talks about how the men recognize that it's the teepee is the jurisdiction of the mother. It's like the womb.
Right.
And in fact, the flaps, he says, he's pretty straightforward about it. The flaps that you enter into the teepee It's like you're entering the birth canal, and everything that the wife says about what goes on around the teepee is her authority. And it's, in a sense, it's the same here. I'm totally just always, if it wasn't for my wife, I would be just sitting on a wooden chair, but because there's some sort of natural nest building instinct for the woman, the divine feminine is concerned about the nest. Like, she has me, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's like, okay. But honest to God, if I was still a bachelor, the house would be pretty bland. It would be just a bunch of walls and a wood fire, a wood stove, and I'd be happy, right? Kind of thing. So I know how I kind of relate to what you're saying, or definitely relate. And I think that's where we need to, sort of think, gee, maybe these Indigenous people actually have something to teach us. Because, I always think, well, if there was a woman involved in some of the recent industrial disasters that we've experienced, so like take the construction of nuclear power plants in the 60s. There's a great story called We Almost Lost Detroit. A lot of people don't realize, there's almost a major nuclear meltdown on the suburbs of Detroit in one of the first nuclear power plants. Anyway, long story short, you can read that, and I just think, what if there was a woman that had been brought in at any point in time during that project, and she would have said, "Are you guys nuts? Shut this thing down. Stop it." And I'd say, anyway.
I don't know. Reagan and Margaret Thatcher had a whole lot in common. So anyhow, I'd like to go back to your work history, because what we're trying to do at YARCI is to create a fuel that could be used in the railroad industry. And I know that's how the railroad industry itself makes itself so valuable, is that its efficiency as far as moving stuff is so much greater than the efficiency of moving it across the roads. And this fuel basically is the capacity to take hydrogen, put it into a liquid, which is like gasoline, and put that gasoline into the vehicle, that liquid into the vehicle, and then use a fuel cell to take that hydrogen and run the vehicle, and then put the used liquid back into a deplenished tank and put it back out where it's recharged. Effectively, it's like a big battery, but it's a very efficient battery. It contains more energy in that fuel than is actually in gasoline, which is really a high energy fuel storage. So I wonder what your contacts are and connections are in the railroad industry still, from the sense of them looking at this.
Well, I have some contacts. My background was track maintenance. That's my area. So that was what they call maintenance of way.
Right.
The mechanical department of a railroad is concerned about the locomotive, the power. And but what you're saying is of interest to me, because I read, or I wore quite a few different hats while working for the railway. And as you said, the train is 5, if I recall correctly, depending on what you're hauling. If it's a heavy commodity, a railroad is probably almost 12 times more fuel efficient than a rubber tired truck
Right.
on asphalt.
Yeah.
Even intermodal, when I say intermodal, we're talking about the container boxes, the 20-foot and 40-foot containers.
Right.
53-foot containers as well. It's not your North American standard. But the even an intermodal railroad carrying containers is still 5 times a minimum of efficiency as compared to taking trucks. So when I was in fact, earlier today, I'd mentioned about, part of the press conference for the K-Mama app should look at metrics. So in other words, saying, by going vegan, your carbon dioxide footprint is this much less. Because that's, I said, the railroads were doing that. They were, to try to attract business to them, they would say, look, ship your product by rail instead of truck, and you're going to save the equivalent of these many thousand trees, kind of thing. But that was during Obama, and as I said, now with Trump, he's basically said, oh, don't worry about any of those EPA regulations, right? But anyway, so your concept of this battery, hydrogen-powered battery, makes sense, because the advantage of a train is you can have any number of rail cars behind the locomotive as some sort of a fuel cell. That's the advantage. Trains now around here, they're 134 cars long. They've and that's probably the same in the United States too. But we run massively long trains, approaching 2 miles in length, right? So if you can put a few of those cars of those 134, you need 3 to make your fuel cell. Well,
it's really not a fuel cell. It's just you have to have a tank for the fuel like you do in an automobile, but you need to take part of that tank as you empty it and have a diaphragm that moves the spent fuel right back into the tank. And then the spent fuel goes back to whatever charging station you're using, whether that's wind, solar, hydroelectric, or whatever way you want to do it. It could even be plain old carbon required, like a regular part of the grid right now. But one of the uses for this fuel system is to operate as a battery on the grid, so that in the grid we have the situation where again, solar and wind are very intermittent, and what we need is a steady flow of energy to the grid to keep it working, so that in the grid we have to have some way to have a battery effect in the middle of it. And in some cases, they actually use batteries, and Elon Musk is building those kind of batteries, but that's a very not friendly environmental solution. The only one that's pretty well environmental as far as a solution is using a water. They take a hydroelectric plant, and when it's running and creating all of this energy, if the grid does not need that energy, then it runs a pump and pumps that water right back up into the lake, so that the water in the higher storage is effectively a battery. But that's not real efficient. This is several times more efficient than that. So, and neither of those create any pollution. That's the main thing. We've got to get rid of the pollution if we're going to keep this earth at all. Michael Moore has made a recent movie called Human Earth, and it's available on YouTube.
Yes, I've seen that. Very interesting.
You've seen that. Well, basically, if you look at that thing, he says the problem is capitalism and the problem is greed, and that the problem is we have way, way, way too many people. The only solution I would get from that is to either get a lot more humane in how we run the world, and recognize that we have to feed, clothe, house, educate, and provide medical care for everybody, or to get rid of a lot of this population so the earth can support the population that would be normal for this kind of planet with this kind of input.
Yeah, and so yeah, the train concept, it sounds fantastic and practical. No, not just fantastic, it's fantastic fantasy.
We do have a little website.
The current locomotive is just a big electrical generator,
Right,
and fueled by diesel, and in fact, when one of these large trains is coming down a hill,
mm-hmm.
you could actually power a small city probably from the generators. You know, they're actually using the generators to brake when coming down the hill.
Right.
Yeah,
you could take that energy and put it back into the fuel.
Yeah, they're electro motors. It's not quite the right word.
Right.
It
operates, I understand,
axle.
Just like my little Prius does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
but I don't know whether it stores the energy that it uses to brake, or whether it just discards that energy. Because the Prius, that's what makes it run as efficiently as it does, is when you're going downhill and it's drifting, it is storing that energy back into its little battery. Which
they're not doing that. That's not happening on a train, okay. Unfortunately, you know.
But with this fuel system, it would be relatively easy to have it take that energy and store it back into the fuel. So take some of the spent fuel and put the hydrogen back into it that it's getting from the electricity or the energy, and go back the other way.
Sounds like a terrific idea. The one thing about it is that this is so cyclical, right? It's just, there was a time when, like, if you go back to 2010, the price of oil was $140 a barrel in some markets. And, you know, and then last week it was negative 37. Right. You had to pay somebody to take it off your hands.
Yep.
So there's no incentive right now for the railroads to switch, but they've got to be thinking forward, right? Thinking in advance, because, you know, we could go back to $140 a barrel, and then they're panicking, because the thing about what you're talking about is it is the fuel in North America, because very little of our railroad system is electrified. The fuel is diesel, and that is the number one cost entry on, or at least at times, the number one cost on their books is the cost of fuel. The only thing they can play around with are the number of people that they have working for the railroad. So they're always looking for ways to, you know, get rid of people, which is the same in any business, because, you know, they have to put fuel in the locomotives. They have to buy diesel, otherwise they don't run.
I would guess that variable is really makes it tough to run the business, because it's just like pumping oil out of the ground. If oil drops below a certain point, it is not worthwhile to pump it. And I have a friend whose father owns several wells that they really will only run when oil is more than $100 a barrel, because otherwise the economics of it are that you don't really make much on that oil that you produce anyhow, because it costs quite a bit to get that oil out of the ground and into the barrel, into what that price is based on. And I think that will continue to happen, and especially if we will put some restrictions on the amount of pollution that they create in pumping that oil. I mean, part of the problem right now that makes natural gas such an economic advantage is that there is no tax, no kind of break that stops them from doing fracking and a lot of things like that that are environmentally very dangerous. So
yeah, we've been so wasteful.
But anyhow, I'd like to connect with you and connect with some of the folks that you know. We do have a little website. It's called YARCCE, YARCCE.com.org. It's just a blog right now. So we haven't done very well in getting a website together either. Okay. But we do have a collective that's trying to work on doing this rather than just you by yourself. So it's not a big collective though yet. We'd like it to be big, but it isn't. And we see what you're doing, Jamin, as being much bigger. And we're trying to learn from you.
Well, thank you. We're all learning from each other.
Yeah, I think you talked to Ed Yarish the other day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the same connection that
Ronald, could you type the website, the blog that you mentioned into the chat? Because I couldn't quite hear it very clearly. Yes. And then after the railway, you were talking, you're shifting, to that Michael Moore's documentary, Planet of the Humans. It's interesting, and I'm glad he's exposing that some of these so-called heroes of the green or the environmental movement are a bit of a deception, maybe even a sham.
Well, my own opinion personally is that Rush Limbaugh and Michael Moore have much more in common than they have different.
Who's the first person?
Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, Rush Limbaugh. Okay.
Right-wing, radical, causes lots of the damage I see in the world. And Michael Moore, who produced this movie and produced first Roger and Me, the first time I got connected with his work. They have much more in common than they have in difference. They're both big fat guys, politically aware, working hard to make a living, pointing out what both sides want to hear. Michael Moore just happens to be in the area that I appreciate, where Rush Limbaugh, comes off as a Nazi to me. Excuse me for getting into that much politics here, Jamie. I don't know if you want that to happen here.
No problem. No problem.
Well, the thing about it is Churchill, here I learned a quote about Churchill from a fire marshal, former U.S. Military man, and the fire captain or fire commissioner of a borough of New York, Mr. Goya, who is trying to get people to join on to his initiative, which is part of a much bigger initiative, but more than just firefighters, but to get into the truth of the global collapse, that's a structural engineering term, of World Trade Center Building 7. And he quotes Winston Churchill, who said apparently, you have enemies? Good. It means you're doing something, or if you pursue the truth, whether you're Rush Limbaugh or Michael Moore, you're in pursuit of truth, you're going to create enemies.
Well, I think that's true. But I think that we need much more nonviolent communication, much more empathy, much more trying to solve the problem rather than to defeat the other human that's here.
Well, and Building 7 is a very good example, I would suggest, as a model, because what you have there is purely an engineering analysis of a structural failure. And the engineers and architects and other building experts are saying it is impossible for the building, a 47-story building, to collapse at free fall speed into its own footprint due to a few office fires. So they're not saying who done it, it's just strictly engineering analysis.
Right.
And so that's nonviolent communication at its best.
Mhm.
And if it's just saying, folks, this is what happened. And you don't have to, I don't think, although I have a degree in civil engineering, I don't actually think you need a degree in civil engineering or structural engineering to kind of like look at that and say, doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, that's just in summary. Great respect for Fire Commissioner Goya and all the people that are working on this, trying to wake people up. They're running into roadblocks, apparently, left and right. The Southern District Attorney of the state of New York is very reticent about telling them what's happening with their initiative to get a grand jury. But that's all about nonviolent communication, getting a grand jury together to look at something, just the facts, ma'am, and let's take a look at it.
So that building could have been built in a way that it would not have fell, even with that airplane flying into it. Is that what they're saying?
Just for clarification, though, I'm not talking about the Twin Towers.
Okay.
Building 7 is a third structure that very many people
That fell. Okay.
tend to forget. It fell at 5:20 in the afternoon.
Yep.
5:20 p.m. And
Yep.
it was minimal damage, never impacted by an airplane at all.
Okay, just the fires.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so they're
I'm
just
not
saying,
that familiar with that at all.
yeah, well, there's a lot on YouTube, and if you go to the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Truth, it's all pretty much laid out there. I'll go get the website and post it in the chat. So anyway, there's a lot of strange things related to that. Of course, then if that's such a strange thing, if Building 7 is inexplicable, well, then you do turn to Buildings 1 and 2, which are the Twin Towers, 110 stories. And you also think, okay, there's also some strange things about the way those buildings collapsed. And then, then you go over to the Pentagon and you say, well, there's also something a little bit strange too, with respect to how this plane comes swinging around and bullseye right into the accounting department of the Pentagon. Anyway, lots of, but that's kind of truth that, yeah, even if the most nonviolent communicator may still find themselves with enemies, right?
I guess. Yep. We all got to learn that we are one earth, one set of people. And right now that the boundary is between us and that virus, not between any country or state. I guess we have done it here just about it, friend.
I'm sorry, Ron.
I said, I guess we have just about done it here. 10 minutes?
Yeah,
or
in
less?
10 minutes. In 10 minutes, it'll be a wrap.
Okay.
Another 24 hours. This is block party number 12.
Number 12. Now, what do you guys actually do on the solution session?
Yeah. It's